Hello student. In this video, I'm going to discuss about the basic idea about hypothesis. Hypothesis. So what is hypothesis? Hypothesis is basically you can see as like a statement only. Here you can see suppose you claim that a new packaging design will produce more sales than the current design. And suppose another statement is like that a new drug will have a higher cure rate for a given disease than any drug currently available on the market. So here you can see these are like some statement, but point is that hypothesis is basically a statement that you are going to prove. Okay, so in this case, in this type of statement, analysis typically collects sample data and checks whether the data provide enough evidence to support the hypothesis. So first, before choosing the sample data or applying your empirical study or experimental study, you might try to start with a statement that your work would be far better than the existing works or something like that. To support your statement, you try to collect the evidence from the collected sample data and check the data whether the data provide enough evidence. The hypothesis that the analyst is attempting to prove is called the alternative hypothesis. So whatever the hypothesis analyst is attempting to prove is called the alternative hypothesis. It is frequently called as a research hypothesis. The opposite of the alternative hypothesis is called null hypothesis. So basically in case of hypothesis testing, we can use these two terms. One is alternative hypothesis or research hypothesis. On the other hand, null hypothesis. In general, we try to prove or analysts try to prove the alternative hypothesis. It usually, let's check more about this topic. Suppose it usually represents the current thinking or status quo. That is, the null hypothesis is usually the accepted theory that the analyst is trying to disprove. So very important statement here. That is, in case of null hypothesis, what the analyst try to do is that the null hypothesis is usually the accepted theory, accepted by the people or accepted by the published literatures, that the analyst is trying to disprove. In the previous example, we'll try to discuss the example later on. First go through that. Suppose here you can see the examples is not but that the statement here you can in the previous window, these are the statement, they are taking this point. So here new packaging design is no better than the current design, means actually the opposite version of the generic statement or generic hypothesis or alternative hypothesis. Suppose you want to prove that new packaging design is best or better than the current design, then in case of null hypothesis, you try to do something like this. You try to disprove this statement. You try to disprove this type of negative statement. That is, the new packaging design is no better than the current design. Or suppose a new drug has a cure rate no higher than the other drugs on the market. So these are negative statement of the previously explained or previously stated statements, where in case of null hypothesis we are trying to disprove it. We are trying to disprove the negative statement or null hypothesis. Smokers are not no more as susceptible to heart disease than non-smokers. So this type of thing we are trying to do in case of null hypothesis. The burden of proof is traditionally on the alternative hypothesis. It is up to analyze to provide enough evidence in support to the alternative. Otherwise, the null hypothesis will continue to be accepted. So suppose you cannot provide enough evidence, then obviously this statement will be accepted. Then this statement cannot be disproved. So in that is the point. Point is that it is up to analyst to provide enough evidence in support of the alternative, the actual one. Otherwise, the null hypothesis will continue to be accepted. A slight amount of evidence in favor of the alternatives is usually not enough. So if your evidence is in favor of alternative slightly, that will not be enough. For example, if a slightly higher percentage of people are cured with a new drug in sequence of clinical tests, this still might not be enough evidence to warrant introducing the new drug to the market. In general, we reject the null hypothesis. And accept the alternative. Only if the result of the hypothesis test are statistically significant, a concept we will explain in this course. The null hypothesis is usually current thinking or status quo, or simple statement. The alternative or research hypothesis is usually the hypothesis a researcher wants to prove. The burden of proof is on the alternative hypothesis. Try to understand this statement. So how will try to test the hypothesis? How will try to prove the hypothesis? So we try to go through an example right now. Here, hypothesis test. Here one example we are going to introduce. Just I read these statements. You just try to give some focus on this. Hypothesis testing is one of the most frequently used tools in academic research, including research in the area of business. Many studies pose interesting questions stated as hypotheses and then test this with appropriate statistical analysis of experimental data. Once a study is reported in McDaniel Kinney, they investigate the effectiveness of ambiguous marketing in prominent sports events such as Olympic Games. Many companies pay significant amounts of money, perhaps 10 million, to become official sponsors of the Olympics. Ambitious are the competitors who pay no such fees but nevertheless advertise heavily during the Olympics, with the intention of linking their own brand image to the event in mind of consumers. You can understand the scenario. The question of McDaniel and Kinney investigate is whether the consumers are confused into thinking that the ambassadors are the official sponsors. Yes, sometimes it happens. At time of 1994 Winter Olympics, Lillehammer, Norway, the researchers ran a control experiment using 215 subjects ranging in age from 19 to 49 years, approximately half of the subjects. The control group viewed a minute tape of women's skiing event in which several actual commercials for official sponsors in 4 product categories were interspersed. The categories are fast food, automobile, credit card, insurance. The official sponsors were McDonald's. Officials are like this one: McDonald's, Chrysler, Visa, John Hancock. The other half, the treatment group, was the same tape but the commercials for competing ambassadors. So those ambassadors also try to put same type of commercials or same thematic commercials similar to McDonald's, Chrysler, Visa, and John Hancock, and so in that way they try to create the competition of the business. The ambassadors were Wendy's, Ford, American Express, Northwestern Mutual, all of which advertised it during the 1994 Olympics. After watching the tape, each subject was asked to fill out a questionnaire. This questionnaire asked subjects to recall the official Olympic sponsor in each product category, to rate their attitudes towards the products, and to state their intention to purchase the products. McDaniel Kinney tested several hypotheses. First, they tested the hypothesis that there would be no difference between control and treatment groups in terms of which product they would recall as Olympic sponsors. The experimental evidence allowed them to reject the hypothesis decisively. For example, the vast majority of the control group who watched the McDonald's commercial recalled McDonald's as being the official sponsor in the fast food category, but a clear majority of the treatment group who watched the Wendy's commercial recalled Wendy's as being the official sponsor in the category. So you can see the confusion. Evidently, Wendy's commercial was compelling because the ultimate objective of commercial is to increase purchase of a company's brand. Obviously, the researchers also tested the hypothesis that viewers of official sponsors commercial would rate their intent to purchase that brand higher than the viewers of ambassador commercials would rate their intent to purchase the ambassador's brand. After all, isn't this why the official sponsors were paying large fees? They are paying like $10 million to get the official sponsorship. However, except for the credit card category, the data did not support this hypothesis. Visa viewers did indeed rate their intent to use Visa higher than the American Express viewers rated their intent to use American Express. But in other three products categories, the ambitious brand come out ahead of the official brand in terms of intent to purchase. So there are at least two important messages this research should convey to business. First, if a company is going to spend a lot of money to become official sponsor of an event such as Olympic Games, it must create a more vivid link in the mind of consumers between its product and the event. Otherwise, the company might be wasting its money. Second, ambitious market is very possibly a wise strategy. By seeing enough of the ambitious commercial during the event, consumer get confused into thinking that ambitious is an official sponsor. In addition, previous research in the area suggests that consumers do not view ambitious negatively for using an ambitious strategy. Yes, so you can see why we might go. Actually, this is a generic scenario. What is helping in this kind of business is that McDaniel and Kinney try to test the hypothesis, try to understand the research. So they try to prove the hypothesis, but they fail. Their actual hypothesis was this one, no difference. But actually there is difference, or maybe that ambitious commercials got more promotion and more intent to purchase. So this is the significance of hypothesis testing. We can understand the backbone research of the commercial business. So now we'll try to understand more about this thing. As we stated in the introduction to this chapter, the hypothesis the manager is trying to prove is called the alternative or research hypothesis, whereas null hypothesis represents the status quo. In this example, the manager would personally like to prove that the, so here again another example, second example, you can go through it. I read this one again. The manager of pepperoni pizza restaurant has recently begun experimenting with a new method of baking pepperoni pizzas. He personally believes that the new method produces better tasting pizza, but he would like to base the decision whether to switch from the old method to the new method on customer reactions. Therefore, he performs an experiment. For 100 randomly selected customers who order pepperoni pizza for home delivery, he includes both an old style and a free new style pizza in order. All he asks is that these customers rate the difference between the pizzas on a -10 to +10, where -10 means that they strongly favor the old style. Plus 10 means that they strongly favor the new style. And 0 means that they are indifferent between the two styles. Once he gets the ratings from the customer, how would he proceed? We begin by stating the example 9.1 is used primarily to explain hypothesis testing concepts. We do not mean to imply that managers would or should use a hypothesis testing procedure to decide whether to switch from the old method to new method. So that is a disclaimer in this point. First, hypothesis testing does not take cost into account. If the new method of making pizzas uses more expensive seeds, for example, then the hypothesis testing would ignore this important aspect of decision problem. Second, even if the cost of pizza making methods are equivalent, the manager might base his decision on a simple point estimate and possibly a confidence interval. For example, if the simple mean rating is 1.8 and 95 confidence interval for the mean rating extends from 0.3 to 3.3, this in itself should probably be enough evidence to make the manager switch the new method. So here you can see if cost of pizza making methods are equivalent, the manager might base his decision on simple point estimate, possibly a confidence interval. For example, if the sample mean rating is 1.8 and 95% on that interval, confidence interval, for the mean rating extends from 0.3 to 3.3, this in itself should probably be enough evidence to make the manager switch to the new method. So again, go back to this part. The hypothesis the manager is trying to prove called the alternative or research hypothesis, whereas the null hypothesis represents the status quo. In this example, the manager would personally like to prove that the new method provides better testing feature. So these become alternative hypotheses. The opposite, that the old style pizza are at least as good as the new style pizza. So here you can see two part. This is the first alternative hypothesis, that is new method, new pizza is providing better tasting pizza, or the opposite or the null hypothesis is that old style pizzas are at least as good as the new style pizzas, becomes the null hypothesis. We assume he judges which of this is true on the basis of the mean rating over the entire customer population, level mu. If it turns out that mu is less than equal to 0, then null hypothesis is 0. Otherwise, if mu is greater than 0, the alternative hypothesis is true, because 0 is to find that at least as good as the new style pizza, the old one. So that is null hypothesis. Mean that mean value of the rating is between -10 to 0, maximum values are there. And also if the rating is 0 to +10, maximum rating is between 0 to +10, then obviously the mu will be also greater than 0. Then obviously alternative hypothesis 2, that is the new method to prepare the pizza is more tasty. So here in this scenario you can understand what is null hypothesis and what is alternative hypothesis and how we can check that thing, where mu is the mean population rating. Usually the null hypothesis is labeled as H0 and the alternative hypothesis is labeled as HA. Therefore, in our example, they can be specified as H0 is mu should be less than equal to 0, and this is alternative is HA should be like mu should be greater than 0. This is typical. The null and alternative hypothesis divide all possibilities into two non-overlapping sets, exactly one of which must be true. In our case, the mean rating is either less than or equal to 0 or it is positive. Exactly one of these possibilities must be true. The manager intends to use sample data to learn this which is true. That is about the testing of the hypothesis, whether it is alternative, whether it is null. And why do you need this? That is for the business. Traditionally, hypothesis testing has been phrased as decision making problem. Whether an analyst decides either to accept the null hypothesis or reject it based on the sample evidence. In our example, accepting the null hypothesis means deciding that new style pizza is not really better than the old style pizza and presumably continuing the new style. In contrast, rejecting the null hypothesis means deciding that the new style pizza is indeed better than the old style pizza and presumably switch to new style. So after this we are going to understand, basically we try to understand in this part, in this video, is about what is hypothesis and what is the mean of null hypothesis or an alternative hypothesis. Next we will try to understand how we can test the hypothesis. There are various type of testing mechanism. Here one is one tail versus two tail test, and there might be errors also, significance levels, rejection regions in case of testings. There are also p-values, because there are importance in case of p-values. Okay, type 2 errors also there, and these are main part. Also we try to go through new style of hypothesis testing, like Z test. There is also F test. There is also chi-squares test. We try to understand those things one by one. Okay. There is F test also. Chi-square test also for independence. So we'll try to go through this one by one, because this is very important in case of analysis. Okay, and this is very important part in case of any kind of data science analysis, and we'll try to go through this in very broad way, because we have given this thing in this two videos, but I'll try to go for more, because we are in actually we are in 8th cycle, but I have make some adjustment to speed up, to give some more times on later part, like this part, hypothesis testing, also regressions, and also other methods and techniques, new techniques, and also try to give some more idea about this hypothesis testing in this cycle, or it might continue in the next cycle also, in a slow way, to make it more understandable and for your benefit. And whatever we have, because this is the last part of the third module, hypothesis testing. After we will go for the fourth module, that is the last module, and also we might not get 15 cycle, we might get only 12 or 13 cycles. So I have to go a bit first. That is also I have skipped few things, not more, but also these things like clusterings and nearest neighbors. You have gone through it many times in many subjects, like in machine learning and other topics also you have gone through it. So but hypothesis testing many times gets skipped or not passed, so I'll try to give it more time. So that's it. Thank you. If you have any doubt, please let me know. That's all about. I'll again upload another video in next day.